To get the full course, visit www.zeedup.com.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. So this is a fresh course of Selenium. Selenium is one of the automated tools that is used in testing, which we will be seeing very soon in depth. But before we go on those routes and before we get started with what is Selenium, there are certain basic concepts that needs to be cleared before we actually jump on Selenium. So before we get started with such concepts, let's quickly first get these concepts and different components that are required to be able to understand the Selenium a little easy and a little more advanced and a little in depth. So before we get started with it, let's understand of Selenium is based on Java. So today, as you can see on my screen, today we'll be just defining what is Java, what are the main features of Java, what are the different data types in Java, and so on and so forth. So today's session we will try to focus as much as possible on Java. Before we get into a lot of nitty-gritties of Java, let's first quickly understand what is Java. So Java is a general purpose class-based object-oriented programming language. Don't worry, we'll come back to object-oriented programming language also and try to understand what is object-oriented programming language very soon. Java is a object-oriented programming language designed for having lesser implementation dependencies. It is a computing platform for application development. Java is fast, secure, and reliable. It is widely used for developing Java applications in laptops, data centers, game consoles, scientific supercomputers, cell phone, etc., etc. Trust me, the use case of Java is huge. Java as a platform is a collection of programs that helps programmers to develop and run Java programming applications efficiently. It includes an execution engine, a compiler, and a set of libraries in it. It is a set of computer software and specifications. So, James Gosling developed Java platform at Sun Microsystems, and the Oracle Corporation later acquired it. So, this is what is a little bit of history of Java. Now, as I have told you that there are certain things that are dependent before we learn about Java as well. So, if you have noticed, I just now passed a keyword called object oriented programming. Okay, let's quickly just look at what is object oriented programming before we actually get our hands dirty with Java. So, object-oriented programming is nothing but it is a computer programming model that organizes software design around data or objects rather than functions and logic. So, an object can be defined as a data field that has unique attributes and behavior. Object-oriented programming is also known as OOP. It's called OOPS. So it focuses on the objects that developers want to manipulate rather than the logic that is required to manipulate them. So this approach to programming is well suited for programs that are large, complex, and actively updated and maintained. The organization of an object-oriented program also helps make the method beneficial to collaborative development where projects are divided into groups. There are some additional benefits of OOPS as well, including code reusability, scalability, and efficiency. Even when using microservices, developers should continue to apply the principles of object-oriented programming. The first step of object-oriented programming is to collect all the objects a programmer wants to manipulate and identify how they relate to each other. If you want to learn about object-oriented programming, as you can see this, I am just going to open this. So this is everything about object-oriented programming. I will not get into the nitty-gritties, but yes, an overview is definitely required for this. So the first step of object-oriented programming is to collect all the objects a programmer wants to manipulate and identify how they relate to each other. This exercise is often known as data modeling. Examples of an object can range from physical entities such as human being who is described by properties like name and address, down to small computer programs such as widgets. Once an object is known, it is labeled with a class of objects that defines the kind of data it contains and any logic sequence that can manipulate it. Each distinct logic sequence is known as a method. Objects can communicate with well-defined interfaces called messages. Then object-oriented programming languages follows a certain principles. First principle is encapsulation. It is nothing but the implementation and the state of each object are privately held inside a defined boundary or class. Other objects do not have access to this class or the authority to make changes, but are only able to call a list of public functions or methods. This characteristic of data hiding provides greater program security and avoids unintended data corruption. Next principle of object-oriented programming is abstraction. So objects only reveal internal mechanisms that are relevant for the use of other objects, hiding any unnecessary implementation code. This concept helps developers more easily make changes and additions over time. Next is inheritance. So relationships and subclasses between objects can be assigned, allowing developers to reuse a common logic while still maintaining a unique hierarchy. This property of forces a more thorough data analysis, reduces development time, and ensures a higher level of accuracy. Last is polymorphism. So objects can take on more than one form depending on the context. The program will determine which meaning or usage is necessary for each execution of that object, cutting down the need to duplicate code. So if I have to name a few programming languages that follow object-oriented approach or object-oriented programming, Java is one of them, JavaScript is one of them, Python is one of them, C#, C++, Ruby, Scala, PHP, and .NET. Now, these are mostly, there are certain types of object-oriented programming, functional programming, structured programming, imperative programming, and so on and so forth. I will not get into the details of all these, but I'll definitely give a gist of all these kinds of programming since they definitely fall under, since they fall already under the Java object-oriented programming category. So if you see this, there are objects and there are classes. There are class-based versus there are prototype-based. Then there is dynamic message. There is encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. This is a little bit of history about how object-oriented was developed, and these are the different aspects that are covered when it comes to object-oriented approach. So if you go on Wikipedia, you'll find a lot of details about object-oriented approach. Let's now quickly switch back to Java. I understand that object-oriented approach is mainly used with Java, and since I have already explained the basics of encapsulation, polymorphism, abstraction, let's quickly cover what is a class and an object, because these also form a very important part of it. So it's important that we cover what is a class and an object. So a class is a user-defined blueprint or prototype from which objects are created. It represents the set of properties or methods that are common to all the objects of one type. In general, class declarations can include these components. For example, modifiers. Modifier is nothing but a class can be public or has default access. Class name is the name should begin with an initial letter. Superclass is the name of the class's parent, superclass, preceded by the keyword extends. A class can only extend a subclass, that is one parent. Interfaces is a comma separated list of interfaces implemented by the class. If any preceded by the keyword implements, a class can implement more than one interface. Last but not the least is the body. A class body is surrounded by braces, which is a curly braces. Next is objects. So just like class, an object is a basic unit of object-oriented programming and represents the real-life entities. A typical Java program creates many objects which, as you know, interact by invoking methods. So an object consists of a state. A state is nothing but it is represented by the attributes of an object. It also reflects the properties of an object. Object also consists of behavior. Behavior is represented by methods of an object. It also reflects the response of an object with other objects. Last but not the least is identity. It gives a unique name to an object and enables one object to interact with other objects. Similarly, there is something called as method. So a method is a collection of statements that performs some specific task and returns result to the caller. A method can perform some specific task without returning anything. Methods allow us to reuse the code without retyping the code. In Java, every method must be a part of some class which is different from the languages like C, C++, Python, and so on and so forth. Methods are time saviors and help us to reuse the code without retyping the code. So these are certain concepts of object-oriented programming. Switching back to our Java concepts. So some important Java applications, like where you can actually use Java is developing Android applications to create enterprise software, wide range of mobile Java applications, scientific computing applications used for big data analytics, Java programming of hardware devices, server-side technologies like Apache, JBoss, etc., etc. Now, as I already know, as I have repeated in this session, Java is considered as one of the fast, secure, and reliable programming languages preferred by most organizations to build their projects. Now, there are certain features of Java. Some of them is it is one of the easy to use programming languages to learn. You can write code once and run it on almost any computing platform. Java is platform independent. Some programs developed in one machine can be executed in another machine. It is designed for building object-oriented applications. It is a multi-threaded language with automatic memory management. It is created for the distributed environment of the internet. It facilitates distributed computing as it JRE. In other programming languages, the compiler produces machine code for a particular system. However, the Java compiler produces code for a virtual machine known as Java Virtual Machine. So why Java Virtual Machine? Java Virtual Machine provides a platform independent way of executing Java source code. It has numerous libraries, tools, and frameworks. Once you run a Java program, you can run on any platform and save lots of time. So JVM comes with just-in-time compiler, which is called as JIT as well, that converts Java source code into low-level machine language. Hence, it runs faster than a regular application. Last but not the least is Java runtime environment, which is a main component of Java. So JRE is a piece of software that is designed to run other softwares. It contains a load of class libraries, loader class, and JVM. In simpler terms, if you want to run a Java program, you need JRE. If you're not a programmer, you don't need to install JDK, but just JRE to run Java programs. So why to use JRE? JRE contains class libraries, JVM, and other supporting files. It does not include any other tool for Java development like a debugger, compiler, etc. It uses important package classes like math, swing, util, lang, and runtime libraries. If you have to run Java applets, then JRE must be installed in your system. So, there are different types of Java platforms. The first platform is called Java platform, which is a standard edition. So, Java standard edition's APIs offer the Java programming language's core functionalities. It defines all the bases of type and object to high-level classes. It is used for networking, security, database access, GUI development, and XML parsing. Next is Java Enterprise Edition. So Java Enterprise Edition platform offers an API and runtime environment for developing and running highly scalable, large-scale, multi-tiered, reliable, and secure network applications. Next is Micro Edition. So Java Micro Edition platform offers an API and a small footprint virtual machine running Java platform, Java programming language applications on small devices like mobile phones. Last is Java FX. Java FX is nothing but it is a platform for developing rich internet applications using a lightweight user interface API. It uses hardware accelerated graphics and media engines that help Java take advantage of higher performance clients and a modern look and feel and high-level APIs for connecting to networked data sources. Now, this is all about Java. This is everything that we need to learn or need to know about Java, definitely. These are a couple of pointers that have been highlighted in the Java programming, but do not forget that we are right now on Selenium. We are learning what is Selenium, how is Selenium different from any other automation tool. But before we dive deep into Selenium, it is important that we understand what is Java, because Selenium is completely based on Java, and to know Java is essential because Java will then help us when we are doing hands-on session with Selenium. Java is definitely going to come into picture, and we are definitely going to have to actually install Java and check out Java and so on and so forth. So before we get into the nitty-gritties and different components of Java and Selenium, actually, it is important to understand it first from Java's perspective, so that later on we do know what are they and how does it work. So what we are going to do going forward is we are just going to understand a little bit of more about Java. For example, the type of variables in Java. basic operators, control flow in Java, and there is something called as exception handling mechanism. So let's understand all these concepts in Java before we actually jump the gun to Selenium. And after we are done with Java, Selenium will have a good start, and we will learn more and more about Selenium and different concepts in Selenium. So that's it about Java, and that is it about Selenium. Actually, we'll be starting more about Java to actually reach to Selenium. Till then, I hope that you enjoyed today's session. Make sure that you are very well versed with the Java concepts that we are right now learning, simply because it is going to help us in the, as I already mentioned, in the coming sessions when we actually want to get into Selenium. A little bit of understanding of Java will always be required. That is why we'll not go into an entire course of Java, but we'll definitely dedicate a couple of sessions towards Java to understand Selenium. So that's it for today's session. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our previous session, since we are getting our hands dirty with Selenium, we decided that it might be a good idea to actually dive deep into Java first a little bit, and then try to understand Selenium. So a little bit of gist about Java I had already given in my previous session. What we are going to be doing is a little elaborative of the last session itself, where we will now learn a little bit of more about Java, because all this, as you can see, we will be using largely into our day-to-day and into our in our Selenium a lot. So before we actually get into it, let's try to understand a little bit about Java data types. There are different data types in Java. There's a lot of data types, actually, to be honest. There are a couple of main data types that are required, and we in today's session are just going to focus on those main data types. Okay, let's understand what is or what are these main data types, and what do they actually mean. So before we understand data types, there is a term that we all need to be familiar about, which is called as variables. Variables are nothing but reserved memory locations to store values. This means that when you create a variable, you reserve some space in the memory. Based on the data type of a variable, the operating system allocates memory and decides what can be stored in the reserved memory. Therefore, by assigning different types of data types to variables, you can store integers, decimals, or characters in these variables. There are two types available in Java. First is primitive data types, and second is reference or object data types. So there are 8 primitive data types that are supported by Java. Primitive data types are predefined by the language and named by a keyword. So there are 8 different primitive data types. First is byte. BYTE. So byte is nothing. Byte is a data type, is an 8-bit signed to complete integer, complement integer. Minimum value is -128. And maximum value is 127. Default value is 0. Byte data type is used to save space in large arrays, mainly in place of integers, since a byte is 4 times smaller than an integer. Next comes short. So short is nothing. Short is again a data type. Short forms a different type, or short is a 16-bit signed 2's complement integer. Minimum value is -32,768 and the maximum value is 32,767. Short data type can be used to save memory as byte data type. A short is 2 times smaller than an integer. Default value is 0. Next is int. Int is integer. Integer data type is a 32-bit signed 2's complement integer. Minimum value is minus 2 to the power of 31 and maximum value is 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. Integer is generally used as a default data type for integral values unless there is a concern about memory. Again, the default value is 0. Next is long. Long is nothing but it is a 64-bit signed 2 complements integer. The maximum value is minus 2 to the power of 63 and maximum value is 2 to the power of 63 minus 1. So this type is used when a wider range than int is added or is needed. The default value is 0L. Now, next is float. Float is also a single precision 32-bit floating point. Float is mainly used to save memory in large arrays of floating point numbers. Default value is 0.0f. Float data type is never used for precise values such as currency. Next is double. So double data type is a double precision 64-bit floating point. The data type is generally used as a default data type for decimal values, generally the default choice. Double data type should never be used for precise values such as currency. Default value is 0.0d. Next is Boolean. Boolean is nothing but it is a data type that represents one bit of information. There can be only two possible values, which is true or false. So this data type is used for simple flags that track true false condition. Default value is false. Next and last is char. Char is nothing but it is a data type, single 16-bit Unicode character. Character type is used to store any char is used to store any type of a character. Next is reference data type. So reference variables are created using defined constructors of the classes. They are used to access objects. These variables are declared to be specific type that cannot be changed. For example, employee, puppy, etc. Class objects and various type of array variables come under reference data type. Default value of any reference variable is null. A reference variable can be used to refer any object of the declared type or any compatible type. Example can be when we do the hands-on is when we'll be actually able to see some examples. So this is more about data type. If you have to define data types per se, data type defines the value that a variable can take. For example, if a variable has int data type, it can only take integer values. In Java, we have two categories of data type, as I have already mentioned, primitive and non-primitive, which can be array, strings, and all these are non-primitive. Java is statically typed language. A language is statically typed if the data type of the variable is known at the compile time. This means that you must specify the type of the variable, declare the variable before you can use it. Now, as we have already seen the different data types that Java already has or Java covers, let's jump to some of the operations or operators of Java. First, operator, there are different types of operators. An operator is a character that represents an action. For example, plus is an arithmetic operator, right? It represents addition. So, let's see the different types of operator in Java. One is basic arithmetic operators, which can be plus, minus, multiply, division, so on and so forth. Next is assignment operator. Assignment operators are equal to, plus equal to, minus equal to, multiply equal to, and so on and so forth. Next is auto increment and auto decrement operators. These are nothing but plus plus and minus minus. These are called the auto increment and auto decrement operator. Next is the logical operator. Logical operators are used with binary variables. They are mainly used in conditional statements and loops for evaluating condition. Logical operators in Java are ampersand, exclamation, which is not. Let's say that logical operators are mostly binary values. Let's just stick to that, okay? Next is comparison or relational operators. So there are 6 different relational operators in Java, which is equal to, greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to, and exclamation equal to, which is not equal to. Now, last but not the least, actually no, there is even more. So for next is bitwise operator. Bitwise operator performs bit by bit processing. So there are 6 bitwise operators. This, when we actually do some hands-on, is when we'll be actually able to see a couple of them. So let's just leave it at that. Next, so these are all about different JavaScript operators that are that form the heart and shape of Java, meaning they are like really required in Java, and you can't actually do anything when it comes to data types in Java. As I have told, it is kind of a mandatory thing in Java, because it forms a huge and unique part of Java, and that is why it is important that you understand what is data type, because data type is, as I have said, it is definitely one of the main points in Java. Next is control flow in Java. So Java compiler executes the Java code from top to bottom. The statements are executed according to the order in which they appear. However, Java provides statements that can be used to control the flow of Java code. Such statements are called control flow statements. So these control flow statements can be of 3 types: decision-making statements, loop statements, or jump statements. Decision-making statements evaluate the Boolean expression and control the program flow depending upon the condition result. There are 2 types of decision-making statements in Java. That is if statement and switch statement. If statement is used to evaluate a condition. The control of the program is diverted depending upon the condition result, that is Boolean value, either true or false. In Java, there are 4 types of if statements: if statement, if else statement, else if statement, and nested if statements. Now, if statement is the most basic statements amongst all the control flow statements in Java, because it evaluates a Boolean expression and enables the program to enter a block of code if the expression evaluates to be true. Okay. Next is if else statement. It is an extension of the if statement which uses another block of code, that is else block. The else block is executed if the condition of the if block is evaluated as false. Next is else if statement. So the else if statement contains the if statement followed by multiple else if statements. In other words, we can say that there is a chain of if else statements that creates a decision tree where the program may enter at any block of code. We can also define an else statement at the end of the chain. Next is nested if statement. So in nested if statement, the if statement contains multiple if statements as a separate block of code. The next type is switch statement. So in Java, switch statements are similar to else if. The switch statement enables us to check the variable for the range of values defined for multiple case statements. Switch statement is easier to use instead of if statements. It also enhances the readability of the program. The switch statement is helpful when you have multiple else ifs. Okay. Next is loop statements. In programming, sometimes we need to execute the block of code repeatedly while some condition evaluates to true. However, Loop statements are used to execute the set of instructions in a repeated order. The execution of the set of instructions depends upon a particular decision or a condition. In Java, there are three types of loops that execute similarly. However, there are differences in their syntax and condition checking time. The first type is for loop. So, for loop is similar to C or C++. It enables us to initialize the loop variable, check the condition, and increment or decrement in a correct or single line of code. Next is a while statement. For loop, first of all, also has something called as for each loop. Java provides an enhanced for loop to traverse the data structures like array or collection. In the for each loop, we don't need to update the loop variable. The syntax that is used is for each loop, and that syntax is very much similar to the for loop. Next comes the while loop. So while loop is also used to iterate over the number of statements multiple times. However, if we don't know the number of iterations in advance, it is recommended to use a while loop. Unlike the for loop, the initialization and increment decrement doesn't take place inside the loop statement in while loop. It is also known as the entry controlled loop, since the condition is checked at the start of the loop. If the condition is true, then the loop body will be executed. Otherwise, the statements after the loop is executed will be then getting executed. Now, these are the different data flows. Next is also something called as do while loop. So the do while loop checks the conditions at the end of the loop after executing the loop statements. However, it is recommended to use the do while loop if you don't know the condition in advance and we need the loop to execute at least once. Now, it is also known as the exit controlled loop, since the condition is not checked in advance. The next type is jump statements. Jump statements are used to refer or to transfer the control of the program to specific statements. Now these specific statements can be anything. So in other words, jump statements transfer the execution control to the other part of the program. There are two types of jump statements in Java. One is break and the next one is continue. Break statement is used to break the current flow of the program and transfer the control to the next statement outside the current flow. It is used to break the loop and switch statement. However, it breaks only the inner loop in the case of nested loop. The break statement cannot be used independently in Java program. That is, it can only be written inside the loop or switch statement. Okay. Next comes Java continue statement. Unlike break statement, the continue statement doesn't break the loop, whereas it skips the specific part of the loop and it also jumps to the next iteration of the loop immediately. So, these are the different types or different workflows of Java, different data flows of Java is what I can say. Last but not the least, let's quickly understand what are variables and variable types in Java. So as I have already told, a variable provides us with a name storage that our programs can later manipulate. Each variable in Java has a specific type which determines the size and the layout of the variable's memory, the range of values that can be stored within that memory, and the set of operations can be applied to the variable. You must declare all the variables before they are used. One of the variables, there are certain types of variables in Java. First is local variables. Local variables are declared in methods, constructors, or even in blocks. Local variables are created when the method, constructor, or block is entered. and the variable will be destroyed once it exits the method, constructor, or the block. Access modifiers cannot be used for local variables. Control variables are visible only when local variables are only visible within the declared method, constructor, or block. Local variables are implemented at stack entry level. What do we mean by stack entry level? Is literally when the variable is declared. There is no default value for local variables, so local variables should be declared and at an initial value should be assigned before the first use itself. Next are instance variables. Instance variables are declared in a class but outside a method, constructor, or any block. When a space is allocated for an object in a heap, a slot for each instance variable value is created. Instance variables are created when an object is created with the use of keyword new and destroyed when the object is destroyed. Instance variable holds values that must be referenced by more than one method, constructor, or block, or essential parts of an object state that must be present throughout the class. So instance variables can be declared in class level before or after use. Access modifiers can be given for instance variables. Instance variables are visible for all the methods, constructors, and blocks in the class. Normally, it is recommended to make these variables private at an access level itself. However, visibility for subclasses can be given for these variables with the use of access modifiers. Instance variables have default values. For numbers, the default value is 0. For Boolean, it is false. And for object references, it is null. Values can be assigned during the declaration or within the constructor. Instance variables can be accessed directly by calling the variable name inside the class. However, within static methods, when the instance variables are given accessibility, they should be called using the fully qualified name. Last but not the least is class or static variables. Class variables are also known as static variables and are declared with a static keyword in the class but outside a method, constructor, or a block. There would be only one copy of each class variable per class, regardless of how many objects are created from it. So you can look at whatever number of objects are created from it. Static variables are rarely used other than being declared as constants. Constants are variables that are declared as public, private, final, and static. Constant variables never change from their initial value. Static variables are stored in the static memory. It is rare to use static variables other than declared final and used as either public or private constants. Static variables are created when the program starts and destroyed when the program stops. Visibility is similar to instance variables. However, most static variables are declared public since they must be available for users of the class. Default values are same as instance variables. For example, the numbers, the default value is 0. For booleans, it is false, and for object references, it is null. Values can be assigned during the declaration or within the constructor. Additionally, values can be assigned in specific static initialization blocks. Static variables can be accessed by calling the class name. When declaring class variables as public, static, final, then the variable names that are constants are all in uppercase. If the static variables are not public and final, the naming syntax is the same as instance and local variable. So this is all about Java variables as well. So we have seen almost all different types of variables when it comes to Java. We have also seen all different types of data types that comes to with respect to Java. So I think more or less we are covered with Java. In next session, let's try to explore a little bit more about different topics related to these, and let's see what are different types of testing before we actually proceed with our Selenium. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Till then, thank you. Hello everyone and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our previous sessions, we have been learning a lot about Java because Selenium, as we have seen, is based typically on Java. So when we have to write our test cases, when we have to understand the nitty-gritties of Selenium, learning a little bit about Java, a couple of introduction sessions will not harm, and in fact will be actually useful when we keep proceeding with a little bit of advanced steps in Selenium. And that is why we are just doing a quick revision for all those who already know Java. Fantastic. But people who do not know, this is a very quick and very brief introduction of Java. This does not involve any advanced of course Java is a huge technologies. As I have stated in my previous sessions as well, it is widely used in a lot of organizations, and it is definitely one of the most powerful programming languages that is out there in the market. And hence many of the organizations have adopted Java as their primary coding language, and they definitely use that in their day-to-day work. So Java is definitely, when it comes to a programming language, it is a powerful programming tool. It is definitely helpful when you want to build applications at scale. It follows object-oriented structure, which we have already seen in the past, encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance, and so on and so forth. What are the advantages of Java? There are certain limitations as well when it comes to Java. We have also seen a couple of them from the huge list, whatever we have, but we have seen a couple of them when it comes to a little bit of disadvantages when it comes to Java. And we have also seen what all can be beneficial if you actually opt for Java, how Java will actually enhance a lot of things, a lot of programs when you actually implement it in your day-to-day needs, whatever. So since a quick introduction of Java is already being done, in today's session I'm just going to do a very quick installation of Java and show you how is Java installation done. If you are new to Java programming in Ubuntu operating system, this session will guide you along in writing and compiling your first Java Hello World program. The applications that you need for this purpose include Java Runtime Environment and Java Development Kit. This session covers the installation of these through the Ubuntu command line. You can write your first program in a text editor, whichever editor you choose. I am going to be choosing Vim. You can use Nano, or you can also use some graphical text tool, whatever you are comfortable with. You will then compile your program in order to create a class that you can then execute in order to run the first program. So, taking a step back now, we are going to start with installation of Java on this Ubuntu system. First and foremost step is obviously, updating your OS. So I'm just going to do a sudo apt get update. After doing apt get update, we are just simply going to start with our installations. The first thing to check is that if you already have a Java version installed. So here, I do not have any Java, and that is why this is my output. If you see an actual version that gets returned, meaning you already have Java installed. Since right now I do not, this is a fresh machine that I'm using right now. This will ensure that either Java runtime environment is already installed on your system or not. So if yes, it will also let you know which version of Java you have on your system. In my case, as you can see, there is no Java installed. So I'm just going to start off directly with, just a second. Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to start off directly with apt install default JRE. Okay. Now, unable to locate is simply a permission issue. Use sudo, and yeah, then you will be sorted. And then all you have to do is simply just wait. The system prompted me, as you can see, for a yes or a no option for us to be able to continue installation. Why to continue, after which JRE will be installed on your system. You can check the installed versions as we, I'll show that to you in detail. After that, remember, we also require Java development kit. So that installation will also we have to done. So we will be focusing on that as well. So right now we are focusing simply on installing. As you see, it is done and done. So all the JRE package, that is Java runtime environment, I have on my machine right now. What I am going to do is I'm simply just going to check for my Java version. So let's just actually put Java and version. Now if you see, earlier it wasn't showing me anything. Now, right now it is showing me a specific JDK version. Okay. Now I'm also going to check if I have, after installing the JRE, now I'm also going to check if we have the JDK installed on our machine. This can be done by checking the version of your Java compiler. That is Java C version. Okay. Now I do not have Java C, meaning the JDK is still not installed. I have just installed the JRE. As I have already mentioned, there's a difference between both. Okay. Now, if your output shows something like this, that means that you need to install the Java compiler or the JDK on your machine. To install that, all you have to do is sudo apt install and default JDK. And again, you will be prompted. If you want to continue with this, simply type Y, because as you see, these type of messages are mainly because what it is just an Ubuntu's way of making you aware that so and so package is going to get installed and so package is going to take this much of your memory or your disk space or whatever memory that you are using. It is kind of a trigger for you to just a warning that if it is crossing a certain number, it definitely will prompt you. If it is not, then I don't think it always prompts. Okay. Now we are going to check our Java C version. What is Java C version? It is the compiler version that we are going to be using to be able to check if we are on track or or something went wrong simply. Okay. Now if you see, it is actually showing me a version. This is where we know that both Java and Java RE, that is Java runtime environment, and Java DK, which is Java development kit, both is installed right now on my machine. I'm now going to write my first Java program. Okay. Before starting to write Java programs, it is best practice to dedicate a directory for all your Java related work. Okay, I'm going to create such a directory through my home folder. I'm just going to do my Java directory. This is nothing, but this is just going to be helpful to be able to track, what are you exactly doing, to keep a track of things. It is just a process and an organized way of doing it. It is not a compulsory thing for sure. Now the next step is to actually write your first Java program. So you can write in this in any of your favorite editors. Here I'm going to be using Vim because I am a fan of Vim. I really enjoy writing in Vim simply because it gives you a lot of customization, I feel, and that is why I prefer Vim. Now you can run the command in any of the, as I said, in any of the editors you can do that. What I am going to be doing is simply Vim, my first program dot Java. Of course, by now I'm guessing that you must be knowing that every For example, a JavaScript file has an extension of .js. Similarly, a Python file has an extension of .py, right? Exactly similar way, Java programs or Java, small scripts that you want to run will always have an extension of .java. Just keep that in mind because it's just helpful, and it definitely comes handy when you are, dealing with a lot of such, when you are dealing with different code, when you are dealing with different programming language. Now, class, this is a simple Java program. So I'm just going to keep it very simple. We will see what is a class. We will also see whatever I'm writing, what is the meaning of all of them. Okay. Now, this is my first program. I'm going to put a public static void main, and I'm going to pass string arguments. Okay, I'm going to keep it empty, and in that, this has to be curly brackets. I'm just going to type a simple system.out, which is nothing but a console log, that is just a print statement to be able to actually print what I want. It is called print system.out println, and within this I'm just going to do a simple hello world. Okay, now this hello world is nothing but a simple a way to get started in Java, a way to get ourselves accustomed to a lot of things that we are right now that we are right now a little in flux, that we are just checking if the installation that we did is actually working or not. Okay, if you remember, I have already done a session in our introduction session of Java. We have already seen what is a class. Okay, so class is, as we already know, Java is an object-oriented programming language. So everything in Java is associated with classes and objects, along with its attributes and methods. So for example, in real life, a car is an object. Car has attributes such as weight, color, and methods such as drive and brake. Okay. Class is an object constructor or a blueprint of creating objects. Okay, so here, as you can see, my first program is nothing but a class that I have simply just created. Now, in Java, an object is created from a class. So since we already have created my first program, so now we can use this to create objects of my first program, this class. So you just have to specify the class name followed by the object name and use the keyword new. Right now I haven't done anything like that because I just don't want to confuse you guys. So that is why let's just keep it as simple as possible. Now, the second question that might come is, can you use multiple classes? Answer to that is yes, you can create an object of a class and access it into another class. This is often used for better organization of classes. One class has all the attributes and methods, while the other class holds the main method. So assume that you had to write another class right here. You can simply do that, and all you have to do is you can just access this class via the next class. Okay. So that is very much possible, and that is not an unknown thing in Java. Okay. Now, if you remember, I had also defined certain things that are to be known about class, which is a class is a user-defined blueprint or prototype from which objects are created. So the main purpose of any class is simply to create an object. Okay. It represents the state of properties or methods that are in common to all the objects of one type. In general, class declarations can include components such as modifiers, which a class can be public or has default values to. A class keyword is always used to create a class. So this is my class keyword. Class name, my first program is the class name. The name should begin with an initial letter capitalized. That is just for, I would say, good practice. Next is the body. The body is surrounded by curly braces, which is this. Okay. Now, this is all about, I would say this is all about creating a class. Now that we have actually created this class, why not we jump into execution of this class just to see what is. Okay. So, I have just saved this program of mine. Okay. The program, as I already mentioned, simply intended to print a hello world on our screen. Save the file and close it. Then it is the time to compile your first program to the Java compiler. Now, just watch what command I'm going to use. It is Java compiler has to compile it, and that is why it is Java C. Java C is the compiler here. My first program.java, this is the command that will show to the compiler to create a class based on the class in your Java code. So this command is essentially just going to create a class based on our Java code. Now, okay, so I'm guessing that our Java class is created. Now, if you see, I had just made my first program.java, right? It is this compiler that has created this class for me. I did not do anything. I just ran the Java C command, which is nothing but a simple command to create a class file, right? In order to run the compiled program, we will have to run it via Java. Okay, so it's very simple. We first ran it via Java compiler. Now we are actually going to use Java and my first program to get the output that is actually supposed to happen. Right now, very honestly, we do not have any idea about whatever happened because simply we did not see any output, right? So if you want to see any output, all you have to do is Java my first program. Now, if you see, this is your hello world right here. Okay. Now, you can always go ahead and write any number of logic that you want within this block. I simply, to give a demo, I have written this, but you can keep doing this as many number of times as you want. You can write a full-fledged logic inside this main method. You can also write your input output operations, or enter a particular number, compile that number, do certain operations, arithmetic operations on that number, and then finally achieve that output. Completely up to you. For me, I took a conscious call because this was a first example that we wanted to do. I did not want to make it very difficult, but you can always, I'm just going to change the method and show you how does the next time it works. First Java program getting printed and dot exclamation. Just an informal statement just to show you how does it work. So if you see, I have now changed my message. Like this, you will come across a lot of use cases where you want to keep on changing the messages. In that case, all you have to do is again always do this, because the class, once it gets created, you also need to compile it, that we have already seen. After doing this particular operation, run your Java command again. Here. Now I have a different message. So the changes start to reflect, and the changes, in order to reflect the changes, it is important that you keep it in mind that you need to compile the program again. So in this session, we have learned to install both the Java runtime environment, the Java development kit, and that is used to compile and run your Java programs. We also wrote a very simple hello world program in Java and ran to see it if you and your system are ready to move to the more complex world of Java programming. Of course, it is not that simple what we have just seen. It is just a start, and that is why I would say that it has come very handy to us. But yes, you can write very extremely complicated programs out here as well. You can run those programs just the way I did right now. You can always check the input output based on whatever logic you have written. We will get into the nitty-gritties of a little bit of more complicated programming, and actually to be able to understand a little bit of more components of Java. We will do that in the coming session. For example, collection framework. It has something called as collection framework, which is array list, linked list, hash set, linked hash set, and so on and so forth. We will see this in our next session, post which we will get into, there are different types of applications, there are different types of automation test types, then there are different automation frameworks, tools, and so on and so forth. So let's get into the nitty-gritties and more depth and detailed things later on. Let's first stick to our basics, understanding the basics of Java program. I hope that the basics were clear here with this particular session. Let's continue this session in our next Java programming world and see how it goes. For now, thank you. Hello everyone and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our previous sessions, we have been looking at different Java tools and different Java programs, how to install Java. We also wrote a very small script of Java we saw how do you print a simple hello world in Java. In this session, we are, as you can see on the right hand side of my screen, that we have something in a simple diagram that is showing you a lot of things in it, right? These are called as collection frameworks in Java. Okay, now what are we exactly going to do with this collection framework is, just a second, I think my screen just, okay. Now, what are we exactly going to do with this collection framework is nothing, but we will be trying to understand these collection frameworks, and then what we will do is we will actually run some very quick and very simple programs in these collection frameworks so that we are able to understand hands-on on these programs. So, first is collections in Java. The collection in Java is a framework that provides an architecture to store and manipulate the group of objects. Java collections can achieve all the operations that you perform on a data, such as searching, sorting, insertion, manipulation, and also deletion. Java collection means a single unit of object. Java collection framework provides many interfaces such as sets, list, queue, etc., etc. And classes also such as arraylist, vector, linked list, hash set, linked hash set, tree set, etc., etc. What is a collection in Java? A collection represents a single unit of object, that is a group. What is a framework in Java? A framework provides ready-made architecture. It represents a set of classes and interfaces, and lastly, it is optional. Now, what is a collection framework together? So, the collection framework represents a unified architecture for storing and manipulating a group of objects. It has interfaces and its implementations, that is classes. And it also has something called as algorithms. Okay. Now, the diagram that you see on my screen right now, it's a simple hierarchy of collection framework. Okay. Java.util package contains all the classes and interfaces for collection framework. Now, There are different methods of collection interface. These methods are like hundreds of them. Trust me, there are at least 20 methods that I am aware of. And these iterable, the first thing that you see here, right? These iterable, the iterables are nothing but provides the facility of iterating the elements in a forward direction only. There are different methods of iterator interface, such as public boolean, public object, public void, and so on and so forth. Now, there are different collection interfaces. Now, what is collection interface? A collection interface is the interface which is implemented by all the classes in the collection framework. It declares the methods that every collection will have. In other words, we can say that the collection interface builds the foundation on which the collection framework depends. Some of the methods of collection interface are boolean, add, boolean add all, void clear, etc., which are implemented by the subclasses of the collection interface. Okay. Similarly, you have different interfaces such as list, as you can see here, list, right? Now, a list interface is nothing but it is the child interface of the collection interface. It inhibits a list data type, data structure in which we can store the ordered collection of objects. It can have duplicate values. Okay. So list interface is implemented by the classes array list, linked list, vector, and stack. To initiate a list interface, we have different methods that we will be seeing into our program very soon. I am now required to share my screen where I can show you actually, whatever. I'm just trying to find. Yeah. I'm now going to share my screen so that I can actually show you how does it work. Let me just try to see. Yeah, I'm now going to share my screen. Just let's see if you are able to see. Yes. Okay. So this is, I'm going to shut this because the diagram is not that helping as much as an actual programming will help. So, let's get our hands dirty with a little bit of collection types that we are being seeing so on. Okay, so let's actually get started with a little bit of collections. Collections, as the terminology itself says, is nothing but a collection of different interfaces which is implemented by all the classes in the collection framework. The first collection that we are going to see is an array list. Okay, an array list class implements the list interface. It uses a dynamic array to store the duplicate effect of different data types. The array list class maintains the insertion order and is in non-synchronized. So the elements stored in the array list contains classes can be randomly accessed. Okay, now I'm going to quickly show you an actual example of this. I'm going to actually create a file called TestJava collection, in which we will be seeing the first collection, and that is my TestJava collection 1.java. And in this, I'm simply going to type a quick method Java collection. Collection 1. Okay, so this is the class. Remember how I told you that util class in Java has all the collections. So util becomes necessary since we are going to import it. Since we are going to use it, importing becomes necessary. Now, of course, public, static, void main, and in this we are going to have a string args, which is an empty array. And now I'm going to start another curly braces just to define what is going to be there within this. Okay, now array list, and I'm going to just make it a simple string list. Okay, so this is how you define a string list is equal to new array. This is how you initiate a collection. Please have a look. And this is just simply creating an array list. Okay, nothing fancy. It is just helping us create an array list. Now we will actually add the items that we want inside this. So I'm going to add Ravi, and then I can also add Vijay. Sorry. Then let's add one other name, which can be anything for that matter. Ajay. Okay, and that's it. Now we are simply going to traverse the list through iterator. Okay, and the iterator that we were talking about earlier, we are now going to iterate. Now iterator, I'm going to initialize it with a small keyword, is equal to list dot iterator. Okay, now I am traversing the list through an iterator. To be able to do that, I'm going to implement a while loop which is going to iterate over this. So this iterator has next, and within this I'm going to type again a system dot out dot print ln, and in this I'm just going to print whatever elements it is right now iterating. Okay, now, and that's it. This is our first array list program that is done, that is created. Now, if we have to see the output first, we need to understand the program. So as you can see, I have first imported the Java util file, the Java util package, and this Java util package contains all the interfaces, all the collections. Okay, I have then declared my class. I declared my method in which I made an array list. In that list, I initialized the list first. It's a string list. Then I went on adding the items. Then I simply I initialized an iterator which will iterate over the list. I'm iterating on the list using a while loop, and then I'm just going to print all the items that it has iterated. Okay, now I'm going to just simply run this file. If you remember, we already saw how do you run the file. First, you always run it via the compiler. Okay, now this is how so there's a syntax array because I have made it an array. I have to initialize it using an array list and not an array. So it's important that we go through these, these mistakes as well, so that we are a little prepared, so that you all don't make these mistakes. And if you all do, you all already have a solution. So I have made the correction. This was an array list versus I had written it array. The new had a different declaration. So now I'm going to do this again, and now it is successful. Now I'm going to actually run this program and check for my output. Could not find or load the main class, that is test Java collection 1. Okay, now what does this error exactly mean? this error is nothing but it is just trying to tell us that this test Java collection 1 and the file that we have initialized has got some, the class methods are not matching. To be able to match this, what we need to do is we need to just check if the spellings are correct, if the spelling is correct. As you can see, the test Java collection 1. This is what we have right now, and this is the file name that we have. It is more or less the same, right? Now, for simplicity, I'm just going to remove this so that we know where does the problem exactly lies. Okay, and test Java collection, I'm going to make it, and I'm also going to make it test Java collection dot Java to test. This is just a renaming process that I'm doing since I have removed the name. I'm not going to change the entire file. I'm just going to rename the file. Now my file is renamed. Now I'm going to recompile the file. Sorry, this one is no more existing. So I have renamed the file, and now we will try to execute the file. If it still has a problem, no, it doesn't. So there must be some mismatch. So all you have to do is, if you can see, this is Ravi, Vijay and Ajay. This is exactly the way we have input it, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to add another Ravi into inside the iterator, and it will print. So it is actually random. It can be randomly accessed the way you want. Okay, now to be able to do that, all you have to do is simply just, sorry, this is the old line, we need it without. Yes, now you can also simply just add this Ravi after Vijay. Okay, now I'm randomly just accessing a name again. Now I'm going to do this again. Remember, you always have to run the compiler first in order to be actually able to see the changes that you made to the file. Now, yes, now if you see, there's Ravi, Vijay and Ravi again, and then Ajay, right? This is how you make an array list. Now, let's quickly see what is a linked list, because linked list is very, very similar. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on linked list, but it is important to understand the difference between a linked list and an array list. So, a linked list implements the collection interface. It uses a doubly linked list internally to store the elements. It can store the duplicate. It can also store duplicate elements. It maintains the insertion order and it is not synchronized. So in linked list, the manipulation is fast because no shifting is required. Now, in our same example, what we are going to do is, actually let me just open the file first. Yes. In this same example, what I'm going to do is, instead of array list, let's make this a linked list. Okay. I'm going to make it a linked list, and I'm going to initialize this using an AL. Simply any naming convention you can use. I just wanted to do it using this, and hence linked list, and it is a string value. Now instead of list, you have to do an AL because I have changed the convention. You could have very honestly kept that, but then the difference that I'm making to the program will not be very visible. Okay, and that is why I have kept it like this. And the iterator continues to be the same, but yes, instead of list, it will now be accessing A. Okay, now iterator.hasNext and iterator.next. Simply, we have kept everything more or less the same. If you can see, I have just changed the collection type, which initially was a linked list, and right now it is which initially was an array list, and right now it is a linked list. That is it. That is the only change that I have made. Similarly, we will be seeing also different set sets such as hash set and linked hash set as well, because that is also something that is very useful. So yes, so let's actually try to run this code and see what happens. My code is more or less ready to be run. Now I'm again going to compile this and check for any errors. No, there are no. So Java compiler also helps to know errors firsthand. What do I mean by firsthand? You can always look back and you can always see that it has some different kinds of error messages for different syntactical error, for some logical error. Variables are not declared, variables are declared but they are not used correctly. Variables are used before declaring. Variable data types, there is a mismatch. All these kinds of errors are obviously not entertained when it comes to Java. It is definitely not entertained, and when it that is the reason you always run the compiler once, so that you are kind of sure that if there is an error, you can always check. And obviously if there are any changes, you definitely need to run those changes beforehand, before to be able to actually see the output. It is important that you check it yourself before. Now if you see, it is exactly the same. Now if you have to understand the difference between linked list and array list, the first one, as I said, was that linked list is definitely faster. When it comes to execution, it is definitely faster. Array list internally uses a dynamic array to store the elements, versus linked list internally uses a doubly linked list to store the elements. In array list, the manipulation with array list is slow because it is internally using an array. So if an element is removed from the array, all the bits are shifted in memory. Versus in linked list, manipulation is faster than array list because it uses a doubly linked list, so no bit shift is required in the memory. An array list class can act as a list only because it implements lists only, versus a linked list class can act as a list and queue both because it implements linked and dequeue interfaces. Array list is better for storing and accessing data. Linked list is better for manipulation of data. So these are a little bit of pros and cons and a little bit of details and nitty-gritties of a linked list and an array list. We have seen both of them. We also executed two different functions or two different set of code to see the difference between both of them. As far as usage is concerned, I have already made you aware of how they both are different. So feel free to use any one of them, but based on your usage and your utilization method. If you want to store a strict list, then it might definitely be better to use an array. But if you want to keep it flexible, where you might switch it later to a queue, and not possibly just want to stick to a list per se, in that case you can always have you can always declare and use a linked list as well. So similarly, just like this, there is something called as hash set and different types of sets that we will be seeing in our next session. This will basically cover all the collections that you have in Java, because when you use this in Selenium, you will be seeing how I'll be reusing all of them. So I hope that this session was helpful when it comes to Java terminologies, and I hope you enjoyed this session. Till then, thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our today's session, we will be looking at something called as software testing process and software testing methodologies. First, we will understand what is software testing exactly, and then we will look at the methodologies that a software testing follows. What are the different approaches when it comes to software testing? So let's begin with what exactly is software testing methodology. So software testing method is defined as strategies and testing types used to certify that the application under test meets client expectations. Test methodologies include functional and non-functional testing to validate the AUT, that is application under test. Examples of testing methodologies are unit testing, integration testing, system testing, performance testing, etc. etc. Each testing methodology has a defined test objective, test strategy, and deliverables. Please note, since software testing is an integral part of any development methodology, many companies use the term development methodologies and testing methodologies colloquially. Hence, testing methodologies could also refer to waterfall, agile, and other QA model as against the definition of testing methodologies. Discussion on various testing types does not add value to the readers and to the people who actually perform it. And so let's get into the nitty-gritties of a little bit of these. So, as you can see on the screen itself, it involves requirement analysis, test planning, test case development, environment setup, and test execution. Within these, there lies something called, now, to be able to achieve these steps, there are further steps that are defined, which are nothing but a waterfall model for that matter. So in our waterfall model, software development progress through various phases like requirement analysis and whatever you can see on my screen, which is sequential. Okay. So in this model, the next phase begins only when the earlier phase is completed. If the earlier phase is not completed, it will not jump to the next part. So what is a testing approach? The first phase in the waterfall model is the requirement phase, in which all the project requirements are completely defined before starting the testing. During this phase, the test team brainstorms the scope of testing, test strategy, and drafts a detailed test plan. Only once the design of the software is complete, the team will move on to execution of the test cases to ensure that the developed software behaves as it is expected to behave. And this methodology, the testing team proceeds to the next phase only when the previous phase is completed. There are certain advantages of this, and then there are disadvantages of it. The advantages is that the software engineering model is very simple to plan and manage. Hence, the projects where the requirements are clearly defined and stated beforehand can be easily tested using a waterfall model. In the waterfall model, you can begin with the next phrase only once the previous phrase is completed. Hence, this model cannot accommodate unplanned events and uncertainty. So, this methodology is not suitable for projects where the requirements change frequently. Next is iterative development. Now, what is iterative development? In this model, a big project is divided into small parts, and each part is subjected to multiple iterations of the waterfall model. At the end of an iteration, a new model is developed or an existing module is enhanced. This module is integrated into the software architecture and the entire system is tested all together into one. Now, what is the testing approach? As soon as iteration is completed, the entire system is subjected to testing. Feedback from testing is immediately available and is incorporated in the next cycle. The testing time required in successive iteration can be reduced based on the experience gained from the past iterations. There are again certain advantages and then there are certain disadvantages of this. The main advantage of iterative development is the test feedback is immediately available at the end of each cycle. The disadvantage is that this model increases communication overheads significantly, since at the end of each cycle, feedback about deliverables, effort, etc. must be given. Again, our methodology is agile methodology. So, I'll just like to show you how does agile methodology exactly look. So I'm just going to reshare my screen for this. Okay, now I'm again going to share my screen. So this is the agile methodology. Okay, if you can see on my screen. So what is it exactly? So traditional software development methodologies work on the premise that software requirements remain constant throughout the project, but with an increase in complexity, the requirements undergo numerous changes and continuously evolve. At times, the customer himself is not sure what he wants. Though the iterative model addresses this issue, it's still based on the waterfall model. In agile methodology, software is developed in incremental, rapid cycles. Interactions amongst customers, developers, and clients are emphasized rather than processes and tools. The agile methodology focuses on responding to change rather than extensive planning. Now, what is the testing approach in this? Incremental testing is used in agile development methods, and hence every release of the project is tested thoroughly. This ensures that any bugs in the system are fixed before the next release. Advantages is that it is possible to make changes in the project anytime to comply with the requirements. Incremental testing minimizes the risk, definitely. Disadvantage is that the constant client interaction means added time pressure on all the stakeholders, including the client themselves, software development and test teams. Next comes extreme programming. Extreme programming is nothing but it is a type of agile methodology itself, but it believes in short development cycles. So a project is divided into simple engineering tasks. Programmers code a simple piece of software and get back to the customer for feedback. Review points for the customer are incorporated, and the developers proceed with the next task. In extreme programming, developers usually work in pairs. Extreme programming is used in places where customer requirements are constantly changing. So, what is the testing approach in case of extreme programming? Add a test case to the test suite to verify the new functionality which is yet to be developed. Run all the tests, and obviously the new test case added must fail since the functionality is not coded yet. Write some code to implement the feature or the functionality. Run the test suite again. This time the new test case should pass since the functionality has been coded. So it is kind of easier this time. And so again, even this approach has its own advantages, benefits. Customers having a vague software design in mind could use extreme programming, definitely. So continuous testing and continuous integration of small releases ensures software code is delivered is of high quality. Disadvantages is that the meetings amongst the software development team and clients add to time requirements. Now comes the biggest question: which software methodology to actually go for, or which software methodology to use? So there are tons of methodologies available for software development and its corresponding testing. Each testing technique and methodology is designed for a specific purpose and has its own relative matrix and merits and demerits. So, the selection of a particular methodology depends on many factors such as the nature of the project, client requirement, project schedule, etc. etc. From a testing perspective, some methodologies push for testing input early in the development lifecycle, while others wait until a working model of the system is ready. How to set up software testing methodologies? So, software testing methodologies, first of all, should not be set up just for the sake of testing software code. The big picture should be considered, and the prime goal of the project should be satisfied with the testing methodology. Scheduling, which is one of the main setup process. Realistic scheduling is the key to the implementation of successful testing methodology, and the schedule should meet the needs of every member of the team. In order to keep all the members of the team on the same page, of course, well-defined deliverables should be provided. The deliverables should contain direct content without any ambiguity. Once scheduling is complete and defined, deliverables are made available. The testing teams should be able to formulate the right test approach. Definition documents and developer meetings should indicate the team about the best test approach that can be used for the project. Transparent reporting is also one of the main factors because it is very difficult to achieve, but this step determines the effectiveness of the testing approach that is used in this project. Now, these are some of the software testing, software testing methodologies. All of this form an underneath part of SDLC lifecycle. If you have to talk of the two main types, one is manual testing and the other is automation testing. This is so agile methodology and all those things form an umbrella. Then comes subparts, which is manual testing and automation testing, which fall under the agile methodology or whichever methodology you actually choose. Then in automation testing comes Selenium. Let's first understand what is exactly manual testing and what is automation testing. So manual testing includes testing a software manually, that is without using any automated tool or any script. In this type, the tester takes over the role of the end user and tests the software to identify any unexpected behavior or bug. There are different stages for manual testing, such as unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing. Testers should use test plans, test cases, test case scenarios to test a software to ensure the completeness of testing. Manual testing also includes exploratory testing as testers explore the software to identify errors in it. Next type is automation testing. Automation testing is also known as test automation, in which the tester writes scripts and uses another software to test the product. This process involves automation of manual process. Automation testing is used to rerun the test scenarios that were performed manually, quickly and repeatedly. Apart from regression testing, automation testing is also used to test the application from load, performance, and stress point of view. It increases the test coverage, improves accuracy, and saves time and money in comparison to manual testing. What to automate? It is not possible to automate everything in the software. The areas at which a user can make transactions, such as the login form or registration forms, any area where large number of users can access the software simultaneously should be automated. Furthermore, all GUI items, connections with database, field validations, etc. can be efficiently tested by automating the manual process. When to automate? Test automation should be used by considering the certain aspects, such as if the software is large and critical project, or the projects that require testing the same areas frequently, the requirements are not changing frequently, accessing the application for load and performance with many virtual users, stable software with respect to manual testing, and availability of time, of course, is one of the factors. How to automate? So automation is done by using a supportive computer language like VB scripting and an automated software application. There are many tools available that can be used to write automation script. Before mentioning the tools, let's first identify the process that can be used to automate the testing process. First is identifying the areas within a software for automation, selection of appropriate tool for test automation, writing test scripts, development of test suites, execution of scripts, create result reports, identify any potential bugs or performance issues. Software testing tools are a lot of them that are there in the market. You just need to define it for yourself, which and what you need. So some of the tools are, of course, Selenium, that we will be focusing in this session. Then comes HP Quick Test Professional. Then comes IBM Rational Functional Tester, Silk Test, Test Complete, Test Anywhere, Load Runner, Wind Runner, Visual Studio Test Professional, and so on and so forth. There are like tons of software testing tools, automated software testing tools that comes into handy when you talk about all of this automation. So if you are looking into software testing, moral of the story of all of this is software testing is a process to evaluate the functionality of a software application with an intent to find whether the developed software met the specified requirements or not, and to identify the defects to ensure that the product is defect free in order to produce a quality product. Now, what do you exactly need for software testing? Why is testing required, or why software testing, right? I would just say that it is always, this is not even a question, because when you start new, you will probably not have any idea about software testing. But as and when you proceed with the applications, it is an art to evaluate the functionality of the software application with an intent to find whether the developed software meets the specified requirements or not, and to identify the defects to ensure that the product is defect free in order to produce a quality product. Of course, the software testing, what if there was no software testing in the software development process, right? Some of the reasons why software testing is become a very significant and integral part of the field of information technologies is that it is cost effective, customer satisfaction, security, product and product quality. All this is very, very essential. So yes, it comes very handy when it comes to this. At the same time, all of them is as a matter of fact, design defects can never be completely ruled out of any complex system, right? So it is not because developers are careless, but because the complexity of a system is interactable. So if the design issues go undetected, then it will be more difficult to trace back defects and rectify it. It will become more expensive to fix it. right? So sometimes while fixing one bug, we may introduce another in some other module, and that too unknowingly, like literally unknowingly. Okay, so if the bugs can be identified in the early stage, then the costs it costs much less to fix it. That is why it is important to identify bugs in the early stages of software development lifecycle. One of the benefits is cost effectiveness. It is better to start testing earlier to introduce it in every phase of the software development lifecycle, and regular testing is needed to ensure that the application is developed as per the requirement. Not to mention customer satisfaction, because in any business, the ultimate goal is to give the best customer satisfaction. Yes, customer satisfaction is very important. So, software testing improves the user experience of an application and gives satisfaction to the customers. Security is also probably the most sensitive and vulnerable part of testing. So testing, which is penetration testing, security testing, helps in product security as well. Hackers gain unauthorized access to data. These hackers steal user information and use it for their benefit. If your product is not secured, users won't prefer your product, right? So users always look for trusted products. Testing helps in removing vulnerabilities in the product. So these are the different advantages of having your software tested. We saw what are the different types of testing involved, which is automation and manual testing. We also saw agile methodology and the different methodologies that are involved when it comes to software testing. We went through each of them in detail to understand each of them, and the use cases that each of them cover, how each of them are different from each other, and based on what scenarios should you use or choose a particular methodology, and how should you actually go ahead in that direction. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. Today's session was only about software testing, the definition, the meaning of it, and the different methodologies. In the next session, we'll actually focus on test automation, and we'll get into a little bit of the types of test automation and so on and so forth, and see the different criteria there. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our today's session, as you can already see on my screen, we will be focusing and discussing what is automation testing. We'll also be going through the process that comes along with automation testing. As you are already aware, in this entire Selenium course, Selenium itself is an automation tool, testing tool. So it's very important for us to be able to understand what is this tool exactly for, and what is this tool exactly used for. Before we get into directly jumping to Selenium, we are here to discuss a little bit about automation testing first. Let's understand what is automation testing, and then understand the process that comes along with when you sign up for an automation testing of a procedure, and then how does Selenium falls into place. So before we jump to Selenium, here we are to discuss automation testing. So what is automation testing exactly? Automation testing, or test automation, it is also called as test automation, is a software testing technique that performs using special automated testing software tools to execute a test case suite. On the contrary, manual testing is performed by a human sitting in front of the computer, carefully executing the test steps. The automation testing software can also enter data into the system under test, compare expected and actual results, and generate detailed test reports. Software test automation demands considerable investments of money and resources. Successive development cycle will require execution of same test suite repeatedly. Using a test automation tool, it's possible to record this test suite and replay it as required. Once the test suite is automated, no human intervention is required. This improved ROI of test automation. The goal of automation is to reduce the number of test cases that can to be run manually and not to eliminate manual testing altogether. So, why automation testing? So, test automation is the best way to increase the effectiveness, test coverage, and execution speed in software testing. Automated software testing is important due to a few reasons, such as manual testing of all workflows, all fields, all negative scenarios. This is time and money consuming. It is difficult to test for multilingual sites manually. Test automation is software testing. Testing does not require human intervention. You can run automated tests unattended overnight. So test automation increases the speed of test execution as well. Automation helps increase test coverage, and manual testing can become boring and hence error prone. Now, which test cases should you actually look to automate? So test cases to be automated can be easily selected using one of the criteria, that is to increase the automation ROI. First is high risk, which means business critical test cases. Next is test cases that are repeatedly needed to be executed. Test cases that are very tedious or difficult to perform manually. Last but not the least, test cases which are time consuming. So, there are some criteria where you come to know that these test cases certain test cases are not at all suitable for automation. So, test cases that are newly designed and not executed manually at least once. Test cases for which the requirement are frequently changing, or the test cases which are executed on an ad hoc basis. Let's jump to automated testing process. Before we get into the different automation testing process, let's first understand. Okay, so since we have already understood, let's understand the test tool selection. So actually it is one of the first steps when it comes to the process, because test tool selection largely depends on the technology the application under the test is built on. So for instance, QTP does not support Informatica. So QTP cannot be used for testing Informatica applications. It's good idea to conduct a proof of concept of tool on AUT. Next is to define the scope of automation. The scope of automation is the area of your application under test which will be automated. The features that are important for the business determine the comes under the scope of automation. Scenarios which have a large amount of data also comes under the scope of automation. Common functionalities across applications, technical feasibility, the extent to which business components are reused, the complexity of test cases, the ability to use the same test case for cross-browser testing, and so on and so forth. All of them define the scope of automation. Next point is planning, design, and development. So during this phase, you create an automation strategy and plan which contains automation tools that has to be selected, framework design and its features, in scope and out of scope items of automation, automation test bed preparation, schedule and timeline of scripting and execution, deliverables of automation testing. So all of these fall under the planning and development of the automation. Next comes the test execution. So automation scripts are executed during this phase. The scripts need input test data before they are set to run. Once executed, they provide detailed test reports. Execution can be performed using the automation tool directly or through the test management tool, which will invoke the automation tool. So example is the quality center is the example can be quality center is the test management tool, which in turn will invoke QTP for execution of automation scripts. Scripts can be executed in a single machine or a group of machines. The execution can be done during the night to save time. Next is test automation maintenance approach. So test automation maintenance approach is an automation testing phase carried out to test whether the new functionalities added to the software are working fine or not. The maintenance in automation testing is executed if you actually want to see Wikipedia's we will just quickly check out test automation on Wikipedia. So here if you see, a lot of these things that I'm talking about are always written. So you can always go back and have a look at them also. So coming to the test automation maintenance approach. Test automation maintenance approach is an automation testing phase carried out to test whether the new functionalities added to the software are working fine or not. Maintenance in automation testing is executed when new automation scripts are added and need to be reviewed and maintained in order to improve effectiveness of automation scripts, which with each successive release cycle. Then there are several frameworks that are set for automation. A framework is a set of automation guidelines which help in maintaining consistency of testing. It improves test structuring. It minimizes the usage of code, less maintenance of code, improve reusability, non-technical testers can be involved in the code. The training period of using the tool can be reduced. Lastly, it involves data wherever it finds appropriate. So there are 4 types of frameworks that are used in automation testing. First is data-driven automation framework. Next is keyword-driven automation framework, modular automation framework, and lastly, hybrid automation framework. Automation tool also has certain best practices. So to get the maximum ROI of automation, the scope of automation needs to be determined in detail before the start of the project. This sets expectation from automation right. Okay. Select the right automation tool. A tool must not be selected based on its popularity, but its fit to the automation requirements. Next is choose an appropriate framework. Scripting standards have to be followed while writing the scripts for automation. For example, create uniform scripts, comments and indentation of the code, adequate exception handling, how error is handled on system failure or unexpected behavior of the application. User-defined messages should be coded or standardized for error logging for testers to understand. And so on and so forth. Next best practice is to measure the matrix, because success of automation cannot be determined by comparing the manual effort with the automation effort, but by also capturing the matrix of certain criteria. For example, the percent of defects that are found, the time that is required for automation testing for each and every release cycle, the minimal time that is taken for a release, custom satisfaction index and productivity improvement. All these things if observed can greatly help in making your automation successful. Let's quickly understand what are the benefits of automation testing. So first is that it is 70% faster than manual testing. Wider test coverage of application features, reliable in results, ensures consistency, saves time and cost, improves accuracy. Human intervention is not required while execution, increases efficiency, better speed in executing tests, reusable test scripts, tests frequently and thoroughly, more cycle of execution can be achieved through automation, and last, early time to market. Then comes, there are various types of automation testing. We will choose certain types and we will also discuss them. Okay. How to choose an automation tool. So selecting the right tool can be a tricky task. So there are certain criteria that will help you select the best tool for your requirement, such as the environment support, the ease of use, testing of database, object identification, image testing, error recovery testing, object mapping, scripting language used, support for various types of tests, including functional test management, mobile, etc. Support for multiple testing frameworks, easy to debug the automation software scripts, ability to recognize objects in any environment, extensive test reports and results, minimize training cost of selected tools. So tool selection is one of the biggest challenges to be tackled before going for automation. First, identify the requirements, explore the various tools and its capabilities, set the expectation from the tool and go for the proof of concept. Next comes the various automation testing tools, but before we actually jump into them, let's understand certain kinds of automation testing that are supported. For example, unit testing. Unit testing is nothing but it is a type of software testing where individual units of or components of software are tested. The purpose is to validate that each unit of the software code performs as expected. Unit testing is done during the development, that is coding phase of an application by the developers. Unit tests isolates a section of code and verifies its correctness. A unit may be an individual function, a method, procedure, module, or an object as well. In SDLC, unit testing is first level of testing done before even integration testing. Unit testing is a white box testing technique that is usually performed by the developer. Though in practical world, due to time crunch, QA engineers also do unit testing. Now, what is the need of unit testing? So, unit testing is important because software developers sometimes try saving time during minimal unit testing, and this is myth because inappropriate unit testing leads to high cost defect fixing during system testing, integration testing, and even beta testing after application is built. If proper unit testing is done in early development, then it saves time and money in the end. There are certain key reasons to perform unit testing. First one is that the unit testing helps to fix bugs early in development cycle and saves costs. Next is it helps the developers to understand the testing code base and enables them to make changes quickly. Good unit tests serve as a project documentation as well, and unit tests helps with code reuse, which is migrate both your code and your tests to your new project. How to do unit testing? In order to do unit testing, developers write a section of code to test a specific function in software application. In order to even to check this kind of automation, whatever is done while performing the unit testing, it is also required that the developers can isolate this function to test more rigorously, which reveals unnecessary dependencies between functions being tested and other units, so the dependencies can be eliminated. Developers generally use unit test framework to develop automated test cases for unit testing. Unit testing is of two types, manual and automated. So unit testing is commonly automated but may still be performed manually, no doubt about it. Software engineering does not favor one over the other, but automation is preferred. A manual approach to unit test may employ a step-by-step instructional document. Under the automated approach, a developer writes a section of code in the application just to test the function. They would later comment out and finally remove the test code when the application is deployed. A developer could also isolate the function to test it more rigorously. This is a more unit testing practice that involves copy and paste of code to its own testing environment than its natural environment. Isolating the code helps in revealing unnecessary dependencies between the code being tested and the other units or data spaces in the product. These dependencies can then be eliminated. A coder generally uses a unit test framework to develop automated test cases. Using an automation framework, the developer codes criteria into the test to verify the correctness of the code. During execution of the test cases, the framework logs failing test cases. Many frameworks will also automatically flag and report, in summary, these failed test cases. Depending on the severity of the failure, the framework may halt subsequent tested. The workflow of unit testing is to create test cases, review or rework on it, baseline, execute test cases. Okay. Now, this is unit testing. Then comes integration testing. This is also a type of automated testing. I'm just going to run through a couple of them, not all of them, though there are a lot of them. I am just going to give you a gist of all of them. Integration testing is defined as a type of testing where software modules are integrated logically and tested as a group. A typical software project consists of multiple software modules coded by different programmers. The purpose of this level of testing is to expose defects in the interaction between these software modules when they are integrated. So, integration testing focuses on checking data communication amongst these modules. Hence, it is also termed as I&T. String testing or thread testing. All these are named after integration testing. Now, why do you exactly need integration testing? Although each software module is unit tested, defects still exist for various reasons, such as a module in general is designed by an individual software developer whose understanding and programming logic may differ from other programmers. So integration testing becomes necessary to verify the software modules that work in Unity. At the time of module development, there are wide chances of change in requirement by the clients. These new requirements may not be unit tested and hence system integration testing becomes necessary. Interfaces of the software modules with the database could be erroneous. External hardware interfaces, if any, could be erroneous. Inadequate exception handling could also cause issues from time to time. So, there are certain approaches and methodologies of integration testing. One is Big Bang approach And next is the incremental approach, which is further divided into top-down approach, bottom-up approach, and sandwich approach. That is a combination of top-down and bottom-up approach. So, this is a little bit about integration testing. Then comes regression testing. Similarly, I'll also give you a little bit just about regression testing as well. Regression testing is defined as a type of software testing to confirm that a recent program or code change has not adversely affected existing features. Regression testing is nothing but a full or partial selection of already executed test cases which are re-executed to ensure existing functionalities work fine. This testing is done to make sure that new code changes should not have side effects on the existing functionalities. It ensures that the old code which is being developed still works once the latest code changes are done. The need of regression testing mainly arises whenever there is a requirement to change the code and we need to test whether the modified code affects the other part of software application or not. Moreover, regression testing is needed when a new feature is added to the software application and for defect fixing as well as the performance issue fixing. In order to perform a regression testing process, you first need to debug the code to identify the bugs. Once the bugs are identified, it is required to make changes to fix it, and then the regression testing is done by selecting relevant test cases from the test suite that covers both modified and affected parts of the code. So this is all about the different types of testing. Although automated testing also covers smoke testing, functional testing, keyword testing, data-driven testing, and black box testing. To summarize our entire today's session, test automation is a software testing technique that performs using special automated testing software tools to execute a test case suite. Test automation is the best way to increase the effectiveness, test coverage, and execution of the speed in software testing. Test tool selection largely depends on the technology the application under test is built on. Right selection of automation tool, testing process, and team are important players for automation to be successful. Manual and automation methods go hand in hand for successful testing. That can be any kind of testing. No hard and fast rule. And test automation maintenance approach is an automation testing phase carried out to test whether the new functionalities added to the software are even working fine or not. And if they are not working fine, they can literally be reported at that particular step as and when it is found. There is no need to leave it for a certain criteria or a certain place. So this is all about test automation or automated testing. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. Since we have dived deep into DevOps, we have learned about Git, we have learned about version controlling system, the types of version controlling system. Then we shifted to Jenkins, where we have seen different Jenkins. In our today's session, we shall be seeing a little bit about Selenium. Well, Selenium is honestly not dependent on any of these, but yes, when it comes to DevOps, it forms a very crucial part of DevOps. It is definitely one of the most important, not most important, but yes, important tools of DevOps. Comes in handy for various features, for various tasks, for various teams, for various kinds of teams. Today's session is just a basic introduction session of Selenium. We will be doing, if you can see from these options, we shall be covering the Selenium WebDriver. These are the companies that use them, and this is their homepage. So if you have to actually go through Selenium, let's actually get started with it. What is Selenium? What it exactly does? What are the downloads? What are the projects? Everything, so on and so forth. So this is the Selenium work page, as you can see already. So let's actually first get started with Selenium itself. Okay, what is Selenium is all that we are going to be learning in today's session. Now, according to Wikipedia, if you see, Selenium is a portable framework for testing web applications. Selenium provides a playback tool for authoring functional tests without the need to learn testing scripting languages. Not quite elaborative, right? So let's make it a little more elaborative. Selenium is a web automation tool which can be used to perform testing only on web application, not desktop based applications. Please note this. There are tools which can be used to automate both web applications and Windows applications, like Quick Test Professional. As everyone is aware that Quick Test Professional is a licensed tool, and Selenium is an open source tool. So you'll have to download it, configure it separately, and to be able to enjoy. So let's dive a little bit deep into, first of all, the Selenium, and then let's try to see if it if it is actually making sense for us. So Selenium is an open source tool that is used for automating the tests carried out on web browsers, which is web applications are tested using any web browser. Now, before you get carried away, let me reiterate that only testing of web applications is possible with Selenium. We can neither test any desktop software application nor any mobile application using Selenium. So it's kind of a bummer, right? So I know what you are going through, but don't worry, there are many tools, as I already mentioned. There is QPT, there is IBM's RFT, HP's QPT, and many more. But the focus of today's session is just going to be dynamic web applications and why Selenium is the best for that purpose. Okay, now let's come to the advantages of Selenium. Since Selenium is an open source tool, there is no licensing cost involved, which is already like taking off a lot of headache, right? Which is a major advantage over other testing tools. Other reasons behind Selenium's ever-growing popularity is that test scripts can be written in any of these programming languages, which is Java, Python, C#, PHP, Ruby, Perl, and .NET. Tests can be carried out in any of the operating systems such as Windows, Mac, or even Linux. Tests can be carried out using any browser, which is Mozilla, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, or Opera. It can be integrated with tools such as TestNG and JUnit for managing test cases and generating reports. It can also be integrated with Maven, Jenkins, and Docker to achieve continuous testing. Now, let's also kind of look at the shortcomings of Selenium. One, I have already stated that we can use Selenium only to test web applications. We cannot test desktop-based application or any other software. There is no guaranteed support available for Selenium, so we need to leverage on the available customer communities. It is not possible to perform testing on images. We need to integrate Selenium with SQL for image-based testing. There is no native reporting facility, but we can overcome that issue by integrating it with frameworks like JUnit. Okay, so before any further, you should know what is Selenium, what is the need of software testing. Okay, because Selenium supports software testing. So, software testing is where it all boils down to. Today's world of technology is completely dominated by machines, and their behavior is controlled by software powering it. With Will the machines behave exactly as we want them to every time, everywhere, every minute? The answer to these questions lie in obviously software testing. At the end of the day, it is the software application's success rate which is going to control your business growth. So the same thing can be said even for web applications, because most businesses today are completely reliant on the internet. Take for example, any e-commerce company, be it Amazon or Flipkart, they rely on customer traffic on their websites and traffic on their web-based mobile applications for businesses. Imagine if something catastrophic happens, like the prices of the number of products being capped at $10, or because of a small bug is that it is not so easily readable part of the code. Then what can be done? How can we prevent it the next time? Is because by testing the code before deployment, right? So there is a need of software testing, of course. But what is Selenium? Is it a software testing tool? Well, Selenium is an automation testing tool. So before we dive deep, let me clear out that software testing is of two types. One is manual testing and one is automation testing. Selenium was founded as an automation testing tool to overcome the drawbacks or limitations of manual testing. So, let's understand what are the challenges that come with manual testing. So, manual testing means the web application testing, which is manually tested by QA testers. So, tests need to be performed manually in every environment using a different data set, and the success failure rate of every transaction is obviously should be recorded. So, the challenge is that QAs face fatigue, boredom, and delay in work. The mistakes and errors because of the manual effort is very likely to happen. This led to the invention of Selenium, which is an automated testing tool. So, automation testing beats manual testing, of course, because automation testing beats manual testing every time because it is faster, it needs less investment in the human resource, it is not prone to errors. Frequent execution of tests is possible. It supports lights out execution, supports regression testing, and also functional testing. So, suppose there is a login page and we need to verify if all the login attempts were successful. Then it will be really easy to write a piece of code which will validate if all the transaction login attempts are a success or not. Automated test case execution. Moreover, these tests can be configured in such a way that they are tested in different environments and web browsers. What else can be done? You can automate the generation of result file by scheduling it for a particular time during the day. Then you can also automate the generation of reports based on those results and whatnot. The key point is that automation testing makes a tester's job a whole lot simpler. So, Selenium comes with a lot of tools, Let's understand what are the components of Selenium. So first is Selenium RC. So if I have to show it to you, here is, let's do a learn more and then let's actually see. As I've already said, we will be doing a little bit of, a Selenium WebDriver. So understanding the components, these are the components. So let's quickly understand these components one by one. Okay. First is Selenium RC, which is remote control. So before I talk about the details of Selenium RC, I would like to take a step back and talk about Selenium project. So Selenium Core was the first tool, but Selenium Core hit a roadblock in terms of cross-domain testing because of the same origin policy. Same origin policy prohibits JavaScript code from accessing web elements that are hosted on a different domain compared to where JavaScript was launched. So, to overcome the same origin policy issue, testers need to install local copies of both Selenium Core and web server containing the web applications being tested, so they would belong to the same domain. This led to the birth of Selenium RC, which is credited to then ThoughtWorks engineers, which was Paul Hammett, I think. RC overcame the problem by involving an HTTP proxy server to trick the browser into believing that Selenium core and web application being tested come from the same domain, thus making remote control a two-component tool, which is Selenium remote control server and Selenium remote control client. So server communicates using the simple HTTP GET POST requests. And Selenium's project's flagship was that Selenium remote control, as it was the first tool and it could be used to write test cases in different programming languages. But the drawback with remote control is that every communication with remote control server is time consuming, and hence remote control is actually very slow. So slow that it would sometimes take hours to complete single tests. From Selenium version 3 onwards, remote control has been deprecated, and it has also been moved to legacy package. So you can, however, download and work with RC, but unfortunately you cannot avail support for it. But on the flip side, why would you want to use a tool which is outdated, right? Especially when there is a more efficient tool called Selenium WebDriver. So before we talk about Selenium WebDriver, I would also like to give you a gist about Selenium IDE and integrated development. So yes, I know we were talking about the integration. Let's first quickly just copy paste this so that I can show it to you. This is required in order to be able to understand the here and we are going to, these are also important. Let's quickly just read aloud about them. So in 2006, when it comes to Selenium IDE, okay, it is an integrated development environment. So in 2006, somebody known as Shinya from Japan had donated his Selenium IDE prototype to Apache's Selenium project. It was a Firefox plugin for faster creation of test cases. IDE implemented a record and playback model wherein test cases are created by recording the interactions with user had with web browser. These tests can then be played back any number of times. The advantage of Selenium IDE is that test records recorded via the plugin can be exported in different programming languages like Java, Ruby, Python, etc. Associated shortcomings, obviously, because everything has a shortcoming. So let's quickly see the shortcomings of IDE. Plug-and play only available for Mozilla Firefox, not for other browsers. I think this was the biggest one. It is not possible to test dynamic web applications. Only simple tests can be recorded. Test cases cannot be scripted using programming logic. It does not support data-driven testing. So I think these are very, very, very major drawbacks. Okay. Now let's see what is Selenium Grid. Selenium Grid was developed by Patrick Lightbody and initially called Hosted QA. It was initially a part of Selenium version 1, to be honest, and it was used in combination with remote control to run tests on remote machine. In fact, with Grid, multiple test scripts can be executed at the same time on multiple machines. Parallel execution is achieved with the help of hub-knob architecture. So one machine will assume the role of a hub and the others will be the nodes. Hub controls the test scripts running on various browsers inside various operating systems. Test scripts being executed on different nodes can be written in different programming languages. So Grid is still in use and works both with both WebDriver and with remote control. However, maintaining a grid with all the required browsers and operating systems is a challenge, of course. So for this, there are multiple online platforms that provide Selenium Grid that you can access to run your Selenium automation scripts. All right. For example, you can always use Lambda test. It has more than 2000 browser environments over which you can run tests and truly automate cross-browser testing. Last but not the least, let's come to Selenium WebDriver, which we are actually a little biased towards. Okay, let's understand what is this. So, founded by Simon Stewart, in 2006, Selenium WebDriver was the first cross-platform testing framework that could control the browser from the OS level. In contrast to IDE, Selenium WebDriver provides a programming interface to create and execute test cases. Test cases are written such that web elements on web pages are identified and then actions are performed on those elements. WebDriver is an upgrade to remote control because it is much faster. It is faster because it makes direct calls to the browser. So remote control, on the other hand, needs a remote control server to interact with the web browser. Each browser has its own driver on which the application runs. Different web drivers is one Firefox driver, Chrome driver, Internet Explorer driver, Opera driver, Safari driver, and HTML unit driver. Let's quickly understand the benefits of Selenium WebDriver. So, one, it supports for 7 programming languages, which is Java, C#, PHP, Ruby, Perl, Python, and .NET. Right? It supports multiple testing on various browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, and Safari. Tests can be performed on different operating systems like Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, etc. etc. It overcomes limitations of Selenium v1 like file upload, download, pop-ups, and dialog barriers. Okay, there are some shortcomings of Selenium driver, of course. One is that the detailed test reports cannot be generated. Testing images is also not possible. So no matter the challenge, these shortcomings can be overcome with the integration of other frameworks for testing images. SQL, as I have already mentioned, can be used, and for generating detailed reports, JUnit can be used. So that draws the conclusion to this session. What is Selenium? If we have to learn a little bit more about Selenium, of course, we will be elaborating a little bit more about Selenium. So in today's session, we have seen what is Selenium. We have seen how do you actually, why is the need of Selenium? What is the purpose of Selenium, to be honest? We have also seen, we didn't get time to actually go through the entire components because it's a relatively a huge topic. So let's keep the components for the later part. But in order to be able to understand the concepts, we first went through all the types of Seleniums, all the support that Selenium gives, what are the different features that Selenium has. It certainly has certain drawbacks also. Okay, we went through each one of these. How does each one of them perform differently? Each one of them, as I have already mentioned, come with their a little bit of drawbacks. We also saw what these drawbacks are. We also saw how these drawbacks can be overcome with integration of different kinds of tools. Very honestly, as I have already mentioned, there are different types of tools that are always supportive of these different Selenium WebDriver, Selenium IDE, or for that matter, even for Selenium Grid. All these WebDrivers and tools are, all these plugins and the tools that I have mentioned, including JUnit, do compensate for a lot of things that are not taken care by Selenium itself. So we tried to cover them also. What are the disadvantages individually of all these three types? It is important that you know before you actually dive deep into why we actually are going to dive deep into Selenium WebDriver, right? There should be a reason behind it. What is the exact reason is important before you actually get into more and more nitty-gritties of a certain kind of whatever tool you use. I always feel that you should have a reasoning why choose a certain tool above other. So that is one of the reasons that we actually went through each one of them. We saw all of their disadvantages, advantages, and other factors. um, in our next session, we will try to actually understand the components of Selenium, this page that we left, the parts and pieces, all of them. Let's see what are the driver requirements. Let's see the manipulation, all these topics. Let's try to cover as much as possible, and then try to dive deep into the actual installation and so on and so forth. Before we get into the installation, I feel there are a lot of topics that we should certainly cover, and then start with the hands-on session, because the theory part, as long as that is covered, we will always be sure of what topics are left to explore more and more. There will always be something or the other to explore, so we need to draw a line somewhere. In our next session, let's explore the components and try to understand the components how much ever in depth as possible. Till then, I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. In our previous session, we have been learning a lot about DevOps tools. We started with Git. We did a brief session of Git. For all those who haven't known about it, not an issue. It is not a major it is not a blocker to be able to run or proceed with DevOps. However, yes, it is definitely an enabler and helps you achieve a lot of things when it comes to DevOps. Now, to be able to proceed with, if you remember in our previous session, we have been learning a lot about Selenium. When it comes to Selenium, a basic introduction of how it is an automation tool, which is definitely helpful when it comes to actual usage of it in terms of solving a lot of your use cases when it comes to providing basic and advanced tool. So it is one of the most widely used open source web user interface automation testing tool. So it was originally, if you remember, it was developed by Huggins in 2004 as an internal tool at ThoughtWorks, to be honest. Selenium supports automation across different browsers, platforms, and programming languages. It can easily be deployed on platforms such as Windows, Linux, Macintosh, etc. etc. Moreover, it supports operating system for mobile applications as well, like iOS, Android, and etc. So Selenium supports a variety of programming languages through the use of drivers specific to each language. Languages supported by Selenium include C#, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby. Currently, Selenium WebDriver is the most popular with Java and also C#. Selenium test scripts can be coded in any of the supported programming languages and can be run directly in most modern web browsers. Browsers supported by Selenium include Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, and also Safari. So Selenium can be used to automate functional tests and can be integrated with automation tools such as Maven, Jenkins, Docker to achieve continuous testing. It can also be integrated with tools such as JUnit for managing test cases and generating reports. So this is all about Selenium. Now, if you remember, we have been doing a lot of research on Selenium, where we decided that we need to come up with the use cases, the components of Selenium, which means that what are the as you can see on my screen, these are the three main components of Selenium, which is Selenium WebDriver, Selenium IDE, and Selenium Grid. So we already did a basic introduction of all of them. To start with, to take this onto our next onto our next session. Let's have a look at let's just reiterate actually on these topics so that we can now proceed with a little bit of depth about actual understanding of these components. So Selenium components consists of Selenium IDE, Selenium RC, Selenium WebDriver, and Selenium RC. So Selenium IDE, which is this was basically a Firefox plugin and one of the earliest and simplest versions of Selenium. It had the record and play feature in order to create an advanced framework. Selenium IDE has to be combined with Selenium WebDriver or RC, if you remember, remote control. So Selenium IDE definitely has some disadvantages, like execution time is slower. It only supports Firefox. There is no parallel execution supported. There is no mobile testing that is supported. Test report generation is also not the best. When it comes to Selenium RC, it is basically a server that allows to create test scripts in multiple programming languages and browsers. It is also known as Selenium version 1. The scripts were developed primarily in JavaScript, Ruby, and Python, and so on. This version of Selenium is deprecated now, so that is one thing to be noted. Selenium RC does not have the record and playback button since it is developed on client server architecture. So to trigger the execution, we need to start the server. Selenium RC provided the option of parallel and remote execution along with Selenium Grid. So Selenium WebDriver, as you can see on my screen, the first option itself that we have here, this one, yeah. So this is nothing but it is a tool that overcomes the disadvantages of Selenium RC. Selenium WebDriver does not have a server and it communicates with the browser and runs it. It supports multiple platforms like Windows, Mac, and Linux, and so on. Selenium WebDriver runs on various browsers like Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, and Firefox. Moreover, it can be written on languages like Java, Python, C#, Ruby, and so on. Lastly, Selenium Grid. Selenium Grid is nothing, it is often used for parallel execution. Selenium Grid and Selenium RC have worked together to run test cases concurrently in multiple machines, browsers, and platforms. So these are the main components that is available in the Selenium. Now, coming to our main topic of understanding these components. So first, as they have already written, building a test suite using WebDriver will require you to understand and effectively use a number of different components. As with everything in software, different people use different terminologies for the same idea. So if you see below, they have given a description of these terminologies. Just to be able to make it clear, I'm just going to read them out aloud so that we all understand, and I will also try to explain each one of these frameworks. So the first one is API, which is Application Programming Interface. This is a set of commands you use to manipulate WebDriver. We shall be seeing this when we actually do the installation and set up our first test case. But yes, API is one of the main component of a WebDriver. Next is the library, a code module which contains the APIs and the code necessary to implement them. Libraries are specific to each language, binding, etc. .jar files for Java, .dll files for .NET, etc. So if you see, each and every driver will have each different kinds of extensions for each different language. Okay. Now, next is driver. So it is responsible for controlling the actual browser. Most drivers are created by the browser vendors themselves. So drivers are generally executable modules that run on the system with the browser itself, not on the system executing the test suite. So although those may be the same system, some people refer to drivers as proxies. Last but not the least is the framework, which is an additional library used as a support for WebDriver suites. These frameworks may be test frameworks such as JUnit or NUnit. They may also be the frameworks supporting natural language features such as Cucumber or Robotium. Frameworks may also be written and used for things such as manipulating or configuring the system under test, data creation, test oracles, etc. So, now the parts and pieces. As you can see, it is WebDriver talks to the browser through a driver. Okay. Communication is two-way. WebDriver passes the commands to the browser through the driver and receives the information back via the same route. The driver is specific to the browser, such as Chrome driver for Chrome's for Google Chrome or Chromium, and then you have something called as Gecko driver for Mozilla Firefox. This way, it remains every browser specific driver. Of course, the driver runs on the same system as the browser. This may or may not be the same system where the tests themselves are executed. So the sample, whatever example we are seeing right now is a direct communication. Okay. Communication to the browser may also be remote communication through a Selenium server or remote web server. So it is, if you see, this is the browser which is sending the information or receiving information from the driver, which in turn is actually communicating with a remote web driver. Now this remote web driver is running on the same system as the driver and the browser. Remote communication can also take place using the Selenium server or grid, both of which in turn talk to the driver on the host system. So where does the framework fit in? So WebDriver has one job and one job only. That is to communicate with the browser via any of the methods that we have stated. So WebDriver does not know a thing about testing. It does not know how to compare things, assert, pass or fail. And it certainly does not know a thing about reporting or when, given, then grammar. Okay. So it is where various frameworks come into play. At a minimum, you will need a test framework that matches the language bindings. So NUnit for .NET, JUnit for Java and RSpec for Ruby, etc. The test framework is responsible for running and executing your WebDriver and related steps in your tests, such as you can think of it looking a key into the following image. So this is the image where the natural language framework tools such as Cucumber may exist as a part of the test framework box, and or they may wrap the test framework entirely on their own implementation. So if you have to compare or if you have to look into it into detail, the ODBC architecture that we are right now talking about, which is the entire method or on which the entire Selenium is based, it is definitely the architecture, if you have to see, of Selenium. It has something called as binding languages here in the picture. If you see this here, the binding languages, let's understand what are these. So Selenium can work on various libraries like Java, Python, Ruby and so on. So it has language bindings for more than one language. Next is JSON wire protocol.
JSON is obviously Java object notation, which we all know. It is used for transferring data from server to the client on the web page. It is based on the REST API that transmits data from among the HTTP servers. Next is the browser driver. Browser driver here it is. So browser driver is nothing but all the browsers have a specific browser driver. They interact with browsers, that is hiding the logic of browser functionality. As the browser driver receives a command, it is run on the browser and the status of the executions goes back in form of HTTP response. Last but not the least is the browser. So Selenium can test applications on browsers such as Firefox, Mozilla, Internet Explorer, and so on. Once we trigger our text as our script for execution, the code is converted into URL via JSON via protocol over HTTP. The URL will then be fed to the browser driver. The browser driver takes the help of HTTP server to get the HTTP request. The browser driver then passes on the request to the actual browser via HTTP. Finally, the test script gets executed. If there is a post request, there will be action on the browser itself. If there is a get request, a response gets generated at the browser and it shall be passed via the HTTP to the browser driver. Then the browser driver passes it to the IDE with the JSON wire protocol. Okay. Now, since we are understanding so much about Selenium's, different methodologies and so on and so forth, Selenium WebDriver can be used for mobile testing, it can be used for smoke testing, it can be used for regression testing, and lastly for functional testing. Apart from all this, it can also be used to monitor the status of the application along with the events or the errors that is happening on it. Okay. So, this is more or less about Selenium WebDriver and also about the components of Selenium WebDriver. To reiterate of, assuming what is exactly this Selenium and why are we doing this, it is an automation tool. There are certain concepts that are yet to be made clear. One of the concepts, if I have to give you an example, is XPath in Selenium. So what is an XPath? This we will be seeing more in detail once we actually try our hands on Selenium. We will be using XPath a lot. So let's just understand what is XPath. Okay, since Selenium is the top choice for developers to automate cross-browser testing for web applications, Selenium offers a wide variety of choices to navigate through the web elements in meticulously designed tests. So XPath is one of the ways or one of the technique in Selenium to navigate through the HTML structure of a page. XPath enables testers to navigate through the XML structure of any document. And this can be used on both HTML and XML documents. So, while other locators in Selenium that search for elements using tags or CSS class names are simpler to use, they may not be sufficient to select all the DOM elements of an HTML document. XPath provides an option to dynamically search for an element within a web page and thus giving sufficient flexibility to tweak a locator to one's advantage. In this session, let's cover a variety of methods to access elements using the XPath locator in Selenium. These Selenium XPath examples will provide a little bit of comprehensive view of all the XPath techniques.
So while Selenium has wrappers for most popular programming languages, the selector string remains the same for all of them. For example, one may use .find element by XPath method of the driver class in Python, but the locator string that goes as an argument to this method remains the same in the programming languages. So, let's quickly take a look at the types of paths in Selenium. So first type is the absolute path. This is the simplest XPath locator example in Selenium. It is nothing but it is to provide the absolute path of an element in the DOM structure. The syntax is simply nothing but HTML body, form, and then your input. Next is the relative path. A relative path or a double slash search begins with double slashes. Okay, so the double slashes signify a break in the absolute path. So to be able to select business any field, you just have to type double slashes instead of the single slash. So there are different Selenium tests that are run on real device clouds to get completely accurate results. There are different methodologies to be able to achieve this as well. So far we have seen Selenium as one of the methodologies, and we are kind of focusing more on the Selenium WebDriver. Nevertheless, the focus is definitely to understand more and more about the Selenium architecture before we actually get our hands dirty. Let's try to also in our next session, what we will do is we will try to understand a little bit of Selenium's RC, the entire RC architecture. What is the difference exactly? There is something called as test cases which we have to set up. Let's understand that also in the next session. In the next session, I will try to put all these pieces together. Actually, let's try with the installation part itself, where we will be able to draw a line that after the installation maybe things will get a little better and a little clearer compared to others. So let's actually try the installation part in the next session and try to understand Selenium while getting our hands dirty, and also try to get the nitty-gritties of Selenium and try to get as much as possible in-depth knowledge of Selenium by actually installing it. If you know, I use Ubuntu as the operating system, so that is one of the prerequisites if you are following this session. Otherwise, yes, it definitely supports Windows and Mac as well. My session will definitely be based on Ubuntu operating system, and we will be seeing a basic installation of Selenium in the next session. Till then, I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Zeedup Technologies. As you can see on my screen, today we are going to be learning about Selenium WebDriver's architecture. So we have already seen what is Selenium WebDriver, how is Selenium WebDriver different from the other components of Selenium itself, how it is an automation tool, what is an automation tool, which other factors do you have to take into consideration before deciding if even you want to or you should go ahead with Selenium. What are the added benefits of Selenium? There are certain drawbacks as well that we have discussed in the past.
There are certain coding languages that are associated with Selenium. We went through one of them, which is Java. We went through a couple of collection frameworks of Java. We went through a basic introduction to Java, the data types in Java, and so on and so forth. So we have kind of now cleared our basics when it comes to Selenium, in terms of understanding Selenium and in terms of everything. So now that we are approaching towards a little bit of advanced side of Selenium, let's actually give it a proper session to be dedicated towards the Selenium WebDriver architecture. Since the basic of Selenium is clear, I will be doing just a quick recap of what we have covered, so that when we try to understand the architecture, things actually fall into play and we are not lost when it comes to the different drivers, the different automation tools. As you can see on my screen, it is not a small tool. It has a lot of things that comes covered within it. So I'm going to do a quick revision of it in the same session as well, and along with that I will cover the architecture. So in the modern world, with each passing day, hundreds of web and mobile applications are being deployed to the web. QA team has to always be there at their toes to ensure that these web applications are functional outside the development environment, by ensuring the functionality is adequately tested before release to the customer. Earlier, this tedious task was done by the manual testers through the human power of observation, taking an enormous amount of time. The Selenium then entered the industry. Selenium is a suite of tools which is Selenium IDE, WebDriver, RC, etc. Trust me, we have seen all of this in detail with explanation, with advantages, disadvantages, when were they covered, when were they put into play, when were they actually introduced, the history behind them, and so on and so forth. So this helps the QA team to simulate user actions to the web browser and automate the user flow, thereby helping in executing a large number of test cases in a short span of time. Selenium WebDriver is one of the most critical members of this family and is well known for its diversity and stability for web automation. Selenium WebDriver has kind of become a de facto for UI automation, and more than 80% of the companies are using it. So, what is Selenium WebDriver? Selenium WebDriver is a set of open source APIs which provide the capability to interact with any of the modern web browsers, and then in turn to automate the user actions with that browser. It is an essential component of the Selenium family. As we know, Selenium is not an independent tool. Rather, it is a collection of tools that make the Selenium suite, which was created when two projects, that is Selenium RC and WebDriver, were merged. So WebDriver was integrated with Selenium RC to overcome a few of the limitations of Selenium RC and now has become the de facto for web automation. You must be aware that after Selenium 2, there are new versions of that have been released of Selenium. In Jan 2021, they have also reached Selenium 4. So, why use Selenium WebDriver for web automation? So, now that we know what Selenium WebDriver is and what it does, let's take a look at why it is the optimum choice to use for web automation. So first feature that Selenium WebDriver enables for web automation is dynamic web page automation. What does this mean is Selenium WebDriver can automate dynamic websites where the content of pages changes by user actions. Browser vendor shift, that is, it works very close to the browser, which means that the browser vendors ship their WebDriver implementation. Hence, they are tightly coupled to the browser, giving it a better experience. Technology agnostic, meaning Selenium WebDriver allows you to automate the test cases for all the web applications, irrespective of the technology used for the development of the application under test. Mimics real user, meaning Selenium WebDriver allows QA to mimic user actions on the websites. Selenium WebDriver can mimic typical user actions like form filling, clicking, button double clicking, key press, as well as advanced user actions such as drag and drop and click and hold, etc. etc. Supports cross-browser testing. So Selenium web browser has the most significant advantage when doing cross-browser testing, where a QA can test for the same website using the same piece of code on different browsers. It enables the verification validation of test cases on multiple sets of browsers at the same time. Supports parallel execution. If there are more scripts to be executed on multiple browsers, then doing them one by one is time consuming. So Selenium WebDriver allows parallel execution using frameworks like TestNG JUnit so that execution of test cases is faster. This allows large scale execution of test cases in short time. View execution results, meaning Selenium WebDriver allows a QA to view the live execution of the automated test run on the computer system as well as on any other CI/CD pipeline machine by supporting functionalities like screenshot, video recording of test cases, etc. etc. Last but not the least, supports modern development techniques. Selenium WebDriver interacts very well with modern development principles like behavior-driven development via integration with the Cucumber library. Broadly speaking, Selenium WebDriver is one of the most important parts of Selenium suites, which supports almost all the features needed for the automation of a web application. Now, why Selenium WebDriver is popular? Apart from the above mentioned whatever capabilities we spoke, WebDriver being one of the Selenium family also encompassed some of the unique characters which adds to its popularity as a web automation tool. For example, multi-browser capability. One of the prime reasons for the popularity of Selenium and WebDriver is its cross-browser support using the same piece of code. It gives the ability to run a specific piece of code that mimics a real-world user using a browser's native support to hit direct API calls without the need for any middleware, software, or device. It also has multi-language support, meaning not all the testers are well versed with a particular language. Since Selenium provides support for many languages, so a tester can use any language out of the supported languages and then use WebDriver for automation. This gives the freedom to write code in the language people are comfortable with. Next is faster execution. So unlike Selenium RC, WebDriver doesn't depend on a middleware server to communicate with the browser. In fact, WebDriver directly interacts with it directly communicates with the browsers using a defined protocol, which enables it to communicate faster than most Selenium tools. Also, since JSON wire itself uses JSON, which is very lightweight, so the amount of data transfer per call is very minimum. So, not last, there are a couple of more, but let's see what are those. So, locating web elements. In order to perform actions like click, type, drag, drop, we first need to identify on which web element like button, checkbox, drop down, text area, etc. we need to perform an action on. To facilitate this, WebDriver has provided methods to identify web elements using various HTML attributes like ID, name, class, tag name, XPath, link text, etc. These elements need to be handled dynamically, meaning there are times when there are web elements on page which change with every load of the page. So since the HTML attributes changes it becomes a challenge to identify these elements. Selenium provides multiple methods to handle these situations, such as contains, which is which is a functional element that can be used with partial or full text and can be used to handle dynamic elements. Handling waiting for elements, meaning not all the pages have the same structure. So some are lightweight while some have a considerable amount of data handling or AJAX calls. Many times the web elements take some time to load. To account for this, WebDriver has provided multiple waiting mechanisms that can be used to pause the script execution for a required amount of time based on a certain condition and then continue once the condition is fulfilled. So, what are the drawbacks of Selenium WebDriver? Although Selenium works a long way out in solving the UI and functional automation of web applications, it is not without its drawbacks. So, first drawback is that it requires programming knowledge and expertise. So, since WebDriver allows you to automate the user action using the code written in a certain programming language, anyone who wants to use it should have a basic understanding of how coding in the language works. People who do not have an understanding of coding in programming language will find it hard to use WebDriver. So there is no support for desktop applications. A Selenium ecosystem, including the WebDriver, was built for the automation of web applications. As such, if you are looking to automate Windows-based application, you will not be able to do so. No customer support, meaning Selenium ecosystem, including WebDriver, is completely open source, which means it is driven by individuals and not by company. Because of this, there is not a dedicated support team to look into your issues. If a person is stuck somewhere, there are many communities, forums, which a person can rely on, but it's about it. But that's about it. Next is no built-in object repository, meaning paid tools like QTP provide a centralized location to store objects called object repository. This ability is not provided by default in Selenium WebDriver. This can be overcome using approaches like page object model POM, but it requires considerable coding skills and expertise. Lack of built-in reporting, meaning Selenium WebDriver can help you run your automation tests, but to provide a reporting capability, you would need to integrate it with the testing framework like JUnit or TestNG or Allure, etc. Last but not the least is managing browser Selenium dependencies. So since Selenium has to rely on capability between the browser drivers and the actual browser itself, at many times due to incapability or bugs in either the browser or the browser driver or browser functionality breaks, the user has to rely on community support to get it fixed. So this is more or less about Selenium. It is definitely one of the handy tools, and it definitely comes with a lot of added benefits. But yes, disadvantages are also a part of it, and it does have its own restriction. Now we can jump at understanding the Selenium WebDriver architecture. So this was our introduction to Selenium WebDriver. Now let's understand Selenium WebDriver architecture. Being a part of overall component system, we deduce that Selenium WebDriver is not a standalone testing tool. It comprises various components but are required to run The core Selenium WebDriver architecture and major Selenium components that are a part of WebDriver are first is Selenium WebDriver client libraries or language bindings. So software testers want to select languages that they are comfortable with. Since WebDriver architecture supports different languages, so there are bindings available for a range of languages. What are these languages exactly? If you can see here, these are the languages, which is Java, C#, Perl, and so on and so forth. Now this also, here the languages are not specified as such, but here you will be able to see them. Now, anyone who has a basic knowledge of working with any of the programming language can get specific language bindings and can start off. This is how Selenium architecture provides flexibility to the testers to do automation in their comfort zone. Next is JSON wire protocol. As per the Selenium architecture, the JSON wire protocol facilitates all the communication. If you see, this is the JSON API that sits in between, right? So it facilitates all the communication that is happening in Selenium between the browser and the code. This is the heart of Selenium. So JSON wire protocol provides a medium for data transfer using a RESTful API, which provides a transport mechanism and defines a RESTful web service using JSON over HTTP. Next is browser drivers. So since there are various browsers that are supported by Selenium, each browser has its own implementation of the standard that Selenium provides. As such, browser specific libraries are available that are specific to the browser and hides the implementation logic from the end user. JSON wire protocol enables a connection between the browser binaries and the client libraries. Last but not the least is the browser. So Selenium will only be able to run tests on the browser if they are locally installed, either on the local machine or on the server machine. So browser installation is definitely necessary. Now, how does Selenium WebDriver actually work? So after seeing the architecture, we know that when a user writes a Selenium WebDriver code in Selenium and executes it, some actions happen, such as an HTTP request is generates and it goes to the respective browser. And there is an individual request for each Selenium command. If you see here, this is how it functions. These are the browsers out here. Okay, now after it hits each and every individual browser, the browser driver receives the request through an HTTP server. The HTTP server decides which actions or instructions need to be executed on the browser. The browser executes the instructions or steps as decided, and then the HTTP server receives the execution status and sends back the status to the automation script, which then shows the result. So this is how it is run, and this is how it is it actually helps and it actually takes place. One of the very common questions that we face is the difference between Selenium and Selenium WebDriver. Although Selenium and Selenium WebDriver are a part of a single ecosystem, there are and they have certain differences, such as Selenium is not a single tool. It is a framework that consists of various independent tools like Selenium IDE, RC, WebDriver, and Grid. WebDriver, on the other hand, is a single tool. It is a component of Selenium. Selenium supports and provides structure and tools for QAs who can write code based on automation as well as codeless automation. WebDriver only provides a code-based mechanism of automation. What will be the key takeaways from all this session, whatever we have done? First, Selenium WebDriver is a component of Selenium family. It's the introduction in the system lead to overcome a few of the shortcomings of Selenium RC. Selenium WebDriver is a set of APIs which makes the interaction and actions on the browser very easy and quick. Selenium WebDriver provides quite a few unique features, such as it can automate dynamic web pages. Additionally, it can automate all the web applications, no matter in which programming language we use to develop them. Last but not the least, Selenium WebDriver interacts with the browser with the help of various drivers provided by corresponding vendors. Now, these corresponding vendors are basically meaning they are, some of them stick to the browsers in the browser support format. Some of them actually go ahead with providing flexibility. So we have seen how each and every Selenium forms a part of different Selenium components. Since it is a huge family, I will say that the dynamic support is vast and it is huge. When we see and we look at the installation, we will see it on Chrome, but yes, the same installation is possible on Firefox itself. So there are certain different ways to be able to function and to be able to avail these benefits when it comes to Selenium. But yes, all of these are very handy and very easy to use tools, all of them for that matter. When we actually get into the practicals and when we actually get into a session where we actually install Selenium WebDriver and look into it, we will be seeing in detail how it is actually different from the others. In today's session, we did a basic introduction to Selenium WebDriver and we understood the architecture of Selenium WebDriver. In our next session, we will try to do the installation of this WebDriver and see how and what happens. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you.